Dr. Richard Diana has over 20 years experience of practicing orthopedic surgery. I must say that makes me feel old because I used to watch him play football for Yale and baseball and all those things. And he's by this time performed over 7,000 surgical procedures. But yet, he is a blazing advocate for non-surgical treatment of osteoarthritis. His plan of an anti-inflammatory diet, light exercise, and supplements have helped hundreds of patients. Dr. Diana graduated with honors from Yale University with a degree in molecular biophysics and biochemistry. He received numerous Yale and national All-American honors in football and baseball. How could he do all that? He was drafted by the Miami Dolphins, and he played in the Super Bowl, 17 was it? Super Bowl? Yeah. He retired from the NFL to attend the Yale School of Medicine, and he specializes in arthroscopic shoulder and knee surgery. He is also a clinical instructor at the Yale School of Medicine and an attending surgeon at Yale New Haven Hospital. He has been an orthopedic consultant to the Boston Red Sox, to Boston College, Temple University, Yale University, Quinnipiac University, and Southern Connecticut State College, as well as many local high schools. We are really delighted that he's able to join us, and he has a wonderful book. I mean, I actually went to hear him speak before, and he has a wonderful book entitled Healthy Joints for Life. We'll now turn the program over to Dr. Richard Diana.
Thanks to everyone for coming today. You know, I have to say I'm not a priest, but I'd like to give special dispensation to Mr. Kennedy and all those associated with the Harvard program today. You can't come to this event. One of our local guests came up to me beforehand and said, do you mind if I wear headphones? And I said, well, why are you wearing the headphones? She said, I'm listening to the Yale-Dartmouth game, so why not? I'd be willing to bet at least $1 million that someone in this room has had joint pain. Am I right?
Yes, yes.
And if none of you have had joint pain, I can tell you that I have. So it was a really safe bet. And it reminds me of my patient, Cy, who said to me, Doc, you got to get me moving. And I said, well, Cy, that's why you're here today. I'm going to get you moving. And you're not going to believe how good you feel. You're going to feel great, and I'm going to get you moving. And he said, Doc, now when you say get me moving, you mean get me out of the state? And I said, no, Cy, I don't mean get you out of the state. I love you as a patient. What I mean is that we want to get you moving because there's a lot of good things that you can enjoy. I know that you want to go and see your granddaughter swim. You want to go to the library, the museum. You want to do things. And it's all a part of the process of getting moving and solving the pain that you have from osteoarthritis. So I say to myself, on many occasions, you know, as a mainstream orthopedic surgeon, what really am I? Am I a mainstream doc or am I a non-traditional guy? And I always like to say that I embraced both. I'm a mainstream doc because I trained that way. I give medications, I give injections, you know, I do surgery every single week. We do physical therapy for people. And I have to say it's very rewarding because many people need traditional care. But what I found over the last 20 years that a lot of people don't need mainstream care. They need more of a non-traditional care. And that non-traditional care really depends on the person taking life and grabbing it and saying, I want to help myself. There are a lot of different ways that you can help yourself with nutrition, with an exercise program, and by changing from non-steroidal anti-inflammatory medications, which have their side effects, to supplements. And many people don't understand that there are studies which show that supplement natural products are more effective than the pharmaceutical non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. And that's not a dig on them because, you know, I've taken them in my life and I know many, many thousands of my patients have as well. It's just to say that there's other ways of doing things. I think we really need to understand the basics of osteoarthritis to help to understand why these non-traditional things can be effective and why they are effective. Because a lot of people don't really have a true belief that anything but mainstream can be helpful. And the truth is, and I have 20 years of experience with patients, thousands of them, these techniques are effective. They may not help everyone, just like taking a Motrin might not help your headache, but these techniques do help a lot of people. I wanted to help my patients because I see so many, and I realize that not all of them need medications, not all of them need surgery. Many of them need just to take life and live it in a different manner. And you know, I had a mom, God rest her soul, who suffered from rheumatoid arthritis. And rheumatoid arthritis is a devastating disease. Osteoarthritis is different. Rheumatoid arthritis is where your own body attacks itself. It's an autoimmune disease. Osteoarthritis is a little bit different. It doesn't involve chemical processes, but more primarily a wear and tear disease. So this autoimmune disease that my mom had, rheumatoid arthritis, it ate away at her joints. And it took away a large part of her life. And as an orthopedic surgeon, to see her suffer so incredibly from the incredible pain that she went through was very difficult. Because as I stood there as a surgeon, as a medical doctor, I watched my mother suffer. And that hurt. And it was very difficult for me to tolerate, but at the same time, I took that as inspiration. I was down at my Miami Dolphin reunion in 2008, and I saw a lot of my teammates, and these guys were amazing hulks of men. They were vigorous, they were incredible athletes, and they were strong as you could imagine. And these guys, over intervening 30 years, had become softer, had become older, had become more arthritic. And my heart went out to all of them. And I said, what is it that I can do to try and help? And I knew that I had to help my patients. I knew that I had to do it for my mom. I knew I had to do it for my teammates. So you're going to find out a little bit today about the science of osteoarthritis. You're going to find out about some of the nutritional things you can do and how nutrition can manipulate your own system. You're going to find out what exercise can do to help you, as well as finding out what supplements can do in addition. So in order to understand osteoarthritis, you have to understand joints. And everybody knows that they have joints, and we're not talking about the kind of joints like you get in Colorado. Those are the kind I've heard that you smoke. These are the kinds that you use to move. And the structure of a joint, basically you've got the bone. Everybody's familiar with bones. And then there's a cap of cartilage on the end of the bone. That cap of cartilage on the end of the bone is nice and rubbery and smooth. At least it's supposed to be until osteoarthritis gets it. And that cap of bone will cushion your joints. It's held in place by ligaments, and then surrounding those ligaments are your muscles and tendons. One of the important things that probably many people haven't heard of is the synovium. And that's the lining around the knee that produces the fluid that lubricates the knee. And it's also the place where a lot of the white blood cells and immune system cells are that can either wreak havoc with your joint or promote your joint very well. Now there's a theory of osteoarthritis called the whole joint theory. And years ago, we all thought that osteoarthritis didn't involve all those other things that I just spoke of, just the cartilage, okay, just that cap on the top of the bone. But we now know that it's the whole joint that's involved. It's not just the cap, it's the whole joint. It's the bone that gets involved. It's the cartilage, yes. The ligaments get involved, the tendons and muscles are involved, and so importantly, the immune system and the synovium gets involved. And so you have a process going on that envelops your joint. It's not just simple wear and tear. Simple wear and tear is pretty easy. You know, you walk on your joints a lot, maybe you have bad alignment, maybe you're a little bit heavy, and you develop degeneration. You develop degeneration and then pain. Well, what we know now is that all those things are true, but the more important thing to understand is that there's inflammation going on at the same time. So imagine your joint, and it's just wearing by mechanical process. Now imagine your joint being submerged, enveloped by acid. And that's essentially what's going on. As your joints start to break down, we now understand that it's not just the wear and tear. It's the surrounding fluids around your knee that are leading to progressive wear and tear. And progressive wear and tear is what you feel as pain. So what exactly is this stuff called inflammation? I'm sure you've all heard the word, but most people don't really understand what it is. You know, it's the body's response to harmful stimuli. You know, what harmful stimuli, what the heck does that mean? That means, you know, infection. So when infection comes in your body, you mount an inflammatory response. A traumatic injury occurs. You stub your toe, you twist your ankle, it swells. That swelling is inflammation. Irritants. You get a sunburn, that redness, the little swelling, that's inflammation. A chemical burn. Maybe you burn yourself from heat. Those are all examples of inflammation. Even pollution. Food can cause inflammation. Maybe you're starting to see why the things you eat can bear on how your joints feel. So we know now that wear and tear, including inflammation, is the reason why you start having pain. So exactly how does that work? Well, just think of dominoes. You start developing osteoarthritis. Osteoarthritis means you're wearing. What does wear mean? Well, you know, think about sandpaper on wood. Sandpaper on wood leads to sawdust, right? Well, instead, in your joints, instead of sawdust you're producing cartilage dust. So the cartilage dust goes, it irritates the joint becomes inflamed. If you are eating incorrectly, maybe it becomes inflamed even more. The idea is we need to fight that inflammation because that inflammation is producing chemicals. Those things that I referred to earlier as acids. And those things that are acids are very, very irritating to the nerve endings. And so what do you feel? Pain, right? Makes sense. So you got osteoarthritis, you develop some inflammation, and then you get pain. What do we care about? Do we care about that we have osteoarthritis, or do we care that we have pain? Most of us care that we have pain. So we don't care if we have an ugly x-ray, we care that we have pain. So the idea is to take domino number one, we've got it, we can't reverse it, accept it, and stop domino number two, which is inflammation. So we stop inflammation, or at least curtail it, and then we can control some of your pain. Makes sense, right? All right, so in traditional orthopedics, what I do on a daily basis, someone comes in, they have a little bit of pain, and we put them on an anti-inflammatory. Pretty easy. You take a pill, you don't have to change your whole lifestyle, you don't have to eat differently, you don't have to go on supplements, you don't have to exercise, just take a pill. And usually that's okay if it's a mild problem. The problem comes for people who have more chronic osteoarthritis because they need to take those anti-inflammatories for a long period of time. And what can an anti-inflammatory, like for instance Motrin, like Advil, like Aleve, like Celebrex, all these that you may have heard of, what can they do? Well, there's a lot of bad things they can do. A lot of great things too, but let's talk a little bit about the bad things. You know, anybody want a stomach ulcer? I don't think so.
No thanks.
No thanks. Not me. That's one of the problems that you can get to with these anti-inflammatories. They can have effects on your liver, on your kidneys, more technical things. But basically, that's why we want to avoid using anti-inflammatories. Well, how about cortisone? You know, mainstream, I give cortisone injections every single day. I mean, think about it, 20 years given 4 or 5 of them every day. That's a lot of cortisone shots, right? I mean, cortisone is a great medication, but given repetitively, what does it do? Softens your cartilage. It weakens your bone. Nobody wants soft cartilage because it wears more easily. Nobody wants soft bone because it crumbles, right? How's Yale doing in that game over there? Yeah? Halftime, all right. Okay. I see Mr. Kennedy left too. Harvard has left the building. Well, anyway. So we're getting back to cortisone. You know, cortisone really is a great medication, but you can't use it repetitively because of the side effects. So you got chronic problem that's not going to go away. What are you going to do? Take a couple of cortisone shots and then live with the pain forever? No, you got to do something else. Maybe surgery is what you need. It certainly could be. But for many people, maybe it's your heart that's the problem. Maybe you have, you know, kidney problems or some other ailment, and you can't have surgery. Well, not all is lost, because we've got other options. No, I'm not saying that I've got a miracle for you, but I've got something that may be able to help you. And from my experience, about 70% of the people are helped by my program. So, let's talk a little bit about nutrition. Everybody loves to eat. I'm Italian, I love to eat. I mean, you can see I love to eat. Great study. You gotta learn about this study. If you want to learn about inflammation. So we take cells, right? We take these cells. Everybody know what a cell is? You know, the smallest parts in your body that act almost like machinery.
White and a red.
White and a red. Yep, those are your blood cells. But you have cells in everything. Your skin cells, your pancreas cells, cells everywhere. And these cells are little working houses. So we take cells, and then we take the hormone insulin, and we drip insulin on the cell. And then we monitor the cell for inflammatory products. And what do you think happens when we put insulin on a cell? It produces a lot of inflammatory products. So we're taking something that we absolutely need, insulin, and we're finding out that if you have a lot of it, it's inflammatory. We don't want inflammation. Inflammation is pain. We want to subdue inflammation. So we want to figure out a way to make insulin at its lowest levels to be effective. Now, most of you may have heard of diabetes. You know, sugar diabetes. Do you have the sugar? Well, sugar diabetes is a problem where either not enough insulin is produced, and you take shots of it, or most people have type 2 diabetes. And type 2 diabetes is all about your cells becoming insensitive to insulin, right? So if you're insensitive to insulin and you're not getting the result, what your pancreas does is it produces more insulin. So you produce more and more and more. And what's the end result? Inflammation. Now, most of you don't have diabetes, but most of you go ahead and you have a nice bowl of pasta. You have toast for breakfast, a bagel. Maybe you have a sweet here and there. I doubt anybody has sweets, right? No, never, right? So we all do these things, and what happens to our insulin levels? Our insulin levels spike. And when our insulin levels spike, what spikes with it? Inflammation. Okay, now here's another little secret for you. You remember our experiment where we took the Petri dish, and we had cells in it, and we dripped a little bit of insulin on it. Well, then some other smart scientist said, wonder what happens when you put insulin with glucose. Glucose is the sugar that all carbohydrates break down to, pretty much. So they go ahead and they drip on that cell some insulin, and then they put a little bit of glucose along with it. And what happens to the inflammatory products that are produced? Skyrockets. So as you go and eat, you have two things that are causing inflammation. You have your glucose and you have your insulin, and together they exponentially cause spikes in insulin. So what we need to learn is exactly how to control insulin, because insulin is the most inflammatory of our hormones. If we can control insulin, we could subdue that inflammatory response. We can help control that second domino that we're talking about, from osteoarthritis to inflammation to pain. So we're going to learn something today called glycemic index. And I don't know, you get some of these terms and they start driving you crazy. Because not only is there a glycemic index, but there's a glycemic load too. Think of it this way. There's a scale which starts at 100 and works its way up and down. And basically what it tells you is what kind of a response insulin has to the food you eat. So for instance, let's say you go ahead and you have a sugar. You know, you get, I want a gummy bear, and I grab a gummy bear and I eat it. Well, that's going to have a glycemic index of about 100, and that's pretty high. Now let's say you decided instead, I'm going to have a cucumber. I'm going to have a slice of cucumber. And so you have that slice of cucumber. That might be an index of 10. So by choosing what you've eaten, you've either caused an insulin spike, or you've caused a very, very low insulin response. That's what you want, right? So what you choose to eat is going to affect your inflammatory level. Now, glycemic load is another thing which gets a little bit more complex, and we're going to deal with that more in the book. But that talks to you about, now if you ate a case of cucumbers, that would probably be worse than eating 2 or 3 gummy bears. It goes to tell you that the amount of food you eat also affects that insulin response. Because, you know, for instance, corn, which everybody has eaten is delicious, has a pretty high glycemic index. Whereas you might find broccoli maybe doesn't. But if you eat twice as much broccoli as you do a small amount of corn, that might be worse for you than just eating the corn. So it's a little bit complex, but the book goes into that a little bit more, and it'll help you to understand how do I control my levels, my insulin response, and it's not that hard. You know, for instance, let's say that you're at a picnic, and you go over to the dessert table, and on that dessert table are some wonderful desserts. And you've got some brownies over there. Oh, they look delicious. And you look over here and you see some watermelon. And then you look and you see some whipped cream. You say, wow, we got some great stuff. And you see some strawberries too. Now, who would eat the brownies here? I see a bunch of people. I don't blame you, because I like brownies too. Who would eat the watermelon? A lot of people would eat the watermelon. I love watermelon. Now, who would pick the strawberries with whipped cream? Well, all the people who pick the strawberries with whipped cream are eating healthy for their joints. The brownie's going to cause an insulin spike. The watermelon, unfortunately, has a high glycemic index and is going to cause an insulin spike. But the berries and whipped cream, fat, you know, the fat in whipped cream is actually good to decrease the insulin response. So you learn these little things, and they can help you. And you say to yourself, I could be just as happy eating strawberries and whipped cream as I can eating a brownie. Maybe not all the time, but most of the time, right? So you learn a little bit, and those little things, when you add them up, can really help you. Now, we've all heard about fats. So in terms of nutrition, my God, of fats and proteins and carbohydrates, fats are demonized more than anything else. But we have to come to understand that our cell membranes, the wrapping around each and every one of our cells, is made of fat. If you don't have fat, you die. You can't live without fat. And you know what else those cell membranes are made of? Cholesterol. If you don't have cholesterol, you lack the stiffness that's necessary for those cell membranes. So a person without fat and without enough cholesterol is a sick person. So we have to realize that fats are not all bad. Fats are necessary. We just got to figure out which ones. Just like we learned maybe the strawberries and whipped cream are better than the watermelon, we got to learn which of those fats we want to start eating. Let's think about some names that you may have heard that are kind of confusing. And it all has to do with the chemical nature of these fats. You've heard of saturated fats. You've heard of unsaturated fats. Now, you know, the media's done a pretty good job of telling us that saturated fats are bad and unsaturated fats are good. And when you generalize things, you know, you can say that's probably pretty true. But in general, you don't want to generalize, because there are saturated fats that are very, very good. For instance, stearic acid is a saturated fat, and that's really good. So we love stearic acid. Palmitic acid is a saturated fat. We don't like that one at all. Now, nobody knows what the heck they're eating unless somebody tells them, right? I mean, there's no labels. There's no labels telling you which one has stearic and which one has palmitic. What you need to do is learn which ones are which. Now, let's talk a little bit about the unsaturated fats. Now, the unsaturated fats, those are supposed to be the good ones, right? But you take an unsaturated fat and you go ahead and you fry it, as we all have at McDonald's and so many other places. And you know, I mean, I've had some fried clams that I absolutely love, but that's not what we want to eat, because those fats at higher temperatures are not stable. And when you eat them, they're even worse than having a saturated fat. So there's some saturated that are good, some unsaturated that are bad. So we got to keep this in mind, and we got to learn more specifics. Because a lot of times it's the details that really get you, right? You need to know those details. Now, people have probably heard of omega-3s and omega-6s. Now, omega-3s and omega-6s, they are both unsaturated fats, right? Nobody's correcting me, so it must be right. Omega-3s and omega-6s are both from the good side, but omega-6s aren't the good ones. So it gets more confusing, right? Omega-3s are the ones that you get from salmon. And the chemical nature of omega-3s, just, you know, what's the difference between an omega-3 and an omega-6? I mean, does anybody really care? Well, you know, my undergraduate major was molecular biophysics and biochemistry, so I'm a biochemistry nut. And the only difference between omega-3s and omega-6s is that the double bond is at the 3 or the 6 position. Who cares?
3 points. 3 points.
Yeah, 3 points. 3 or the 6. So it's just all chemical stuff. You know, it's very technical stuff. But the important part for you to know is the omega-3s are the good ones, and the omega-6s are the bad ones. Now, who knows what the omega-6s are? Unfortunately, it's vegetable oils. Anybody have salad dressing this week? Store-bought? Omega-6s. We think we're doing ourselves a good, and we go and we have a nice salad, and we put some wonderful Italian dressing from Wishbone on it, or maybe it's a blue cheese or Parmesan or French, and then you look in there and you say, oh no, it's vegetable oils. It's all vegetable oils. And you're saying, oh darn it, vegetable oils. And vegetable oils are omega-6s. And what's the big deal? Well, here's the big deal. Omega-6s are enzymatically changed to prostaglandin 2s. Oh no, those words, what are those words? Prostaglandin 2s cause inflammation. Domino 2 goes down, I feel pain. Omega-3s enzymatically changed to prostaglandin 3s. Prostaglandin 3s, anti-inflammatory, victory, no pain. We stopped the second domino from falling. Okay? That's not so hard, right? It kind of makes sense. And you've got someone with a molecular background telling you that there are molecular pathways that we can change. This isn't based on just me giving a few things to a few different people. This is the science. This is the science behind it. And this is why we're telling you that you need to avoid omega-6s if you can. And we need to get in more omega-3s. So you see people taking flaxseed. Well, why do they take flax seeds? Flax seeds are enzymatically changed in your body to omega-3s. We can't make omega-3s. Even salmon, the thing that has more omega-3s in than anything, can't make it. Salmon gets it from eating plankton that have omega-3s. And that's why you need to get certain types of salmon when you want your omega-3s. More confusing stuff. Oh my God, I had salmon for so long. I had the best kind, the kind that was farm bred. I said, oh no. Farm bred, they're fed certain things. They don't eat the plankton that has all the omega-3s. So here you are thinking you're doing a great job grilling that salmon and eating a delicious salmon, and it's not benefiting you because it doesn't have the omega-3s. So you got to know these little things. These little things come to help you. Now, we're talking about fats, and they're demonized, but we know that cells are made of fats, and we need fats, and so we want to eat the good ones, and we want to stay away from the bad ones. We know we can't really listen to everything about saturated and unsaturated, because there are some unsaturated that are really bad, like omega-6s. But what's the worst fat of all? I heard the right response. That's 100 on your test. Trans fats. Now, trans fats. Anyone else heard of trans fats? Can anyone identify a trans fat? Well, when you look on the label, you look for partially hydrogenated blank oil. So it says, usually it's partially hydrogenated soybean oil. And then you know there's a trans fat in whatever you're eating. So you got to read the labels. You got to look at the labels, and those labels are going to tell you things. Now, there's a trick here, because I was looking at the peanut butter. And the peanut butter said partially hydrogenated soybean, or no, I think it was partially hydrogenated palm oil. And the government because the government's really smart, right? Mr. Kennedy's gone, so I'm okay. It goes ahead and it puts on the label, trans fats. They legislate, you gotta put trans fats. You gotta tell the people if there's trans fats. But what they don't tell you is that they round the numbers. So if you have 0.45 grams per teaspoon or whatever ounce, they put that down as 0. So you go ahead and you have 5 teaspoons of peanut butter on your peanut butter sandwich, and you've gotten almost 2.5 grams of trans fats. So they trick you. So if you see on a label partially hydrogenated anything, even if it says 0 trans fats, you don't eat it. You don't buy it. Because those are the most inflammatory. You know, the second domino has a party when he hears that trans fat is coming. So you don't want inflammation, you don't want trans fats. All right, so we talked a little bit about carbohydrates, and we talked a little bit about fats, and what's left? Proteins. Proteins. What are proteins? Proteins are strings of amino acids. Now, most people don't realize that amino acids are so important, it's unbelievable. All the little messengers in your body, there's thousands of them that are going all over the place, they're made out of amino acids, strung together. They're little protein molecules. And those protein molecules we want to be good kinds as opposed to bad kinds. Now, we can't tell our body how to assemble the amino acids. We can't do that. But what we can do is watch what's coming along with our proteins. So in other words, we say, I'm going to have a steak because I love to grill, and I do. I love to grill, and I love to have a steak. But I know that coming along with those wonderful amino acids and proteins in the steak are also a lot of bad fats. So what do? I go ahead and I buy grass-fed steak. And why do I do that? Because it's expensive? No, I don't do it because it's expensive. I do it because it has stearic acid in it, whereas a regular grain-fed cow has the palmitic and myristic acid in it. So this is really technical stuff, but I say you eat the steer with stearic acid. Pretty easy, right? A steer with stearic acid, that's the grass-fed steer. So when you go and you're cooking a steak, you know, costs a little bit more, but your joints might thank you for it. You know, you're going to have a hamburger. Don't have a regular cow. Have buffalo. You know, buffalo is good. It's a little more expensive too. Or maybe you want grass-fed ground meat. That's good too. I've seen it at Whole Foods. It's expensive.
Why is the buffalo better?
Buffalo is just a leaner cut. For some reason, what the buffalo eats, the buffalo ranges, or whatever, it's different. Their fat profile is completely different. And in fact, in the book, there's a chart, and it shows you the actual fat content of, for instance, buffalo versus, a cow. So we're learning a little bit more about, the nutrition side of things. We're learning a little bit about carbohydrates. We're learning a little bit more about fats, and we're learning some about the proteins. So we're not going to eat proteins if we can that bring the bad fats with them, and we're going to try to reduce the number of carbohydrates that we have. So it's very important that we think about preparing our kitchen, and that's what the book tells you. We need to get things out of the house. We need to take all that wishbone dressing that has the omega-6s in it and get rid of it. It's not helping you any. We need to really get our pantry right. We need to get it so that we can't fail. And I like to think about the time when I was home, and I've got children, teenage children, a wonderful wife, and they're great. I have a great family. But we all like to be home alone sometimes, don't you? I mean, nobody to bother you. And for me, I'm an old football player. And how was that Yale score, by the way?
Turn it off there.
That's good. You turned it off because you're interested in it. So anyway, it was a Saturday afternoon. Everybody goes away. College football's on. I sit down. So what's the natural tendency? You're thinking about, you're going to have a beer. I'm going to sit down, maybe have a cheeseburger or whatever. Go over to the pantry. There's nothing. There's nothing bad there. There's all good stuff there. So instead, I have a low-carb pita. I stuff it with some pesto chicken that I had made with little cuts of onion in it. And I'm saying to myself, my God, this is actually better than the burger. And so it's a different way of doing things that comes to help you. So the bottom line is that we can eat just as well, we just have to eat smarter. You don't have to eat nothing like a bird or, you know, eat so differently. Eat things you like, just eat smart. There's lists. They'll tell you what things are good, what things aren't so good. You might find that you like a bunch of the good things, don't like a bunch of the good things. Well, don't eat the things you don't like. Eat the one. There's enough to satisfy everyone. In fact, the sequel book to Healthy Joints for Life is the Healthy Joint Cookbook, which helps people basically to come up with, you know, more ingenious ways of combining those good things, because this stuff really is important. Yeah, sure.
Does this help for people with gout?
Gout's a different process. You know, you eat meats and, you know, Ben Franklin and the gout, you remember that? You know, you eat a lot of different things, you eat steaks and chocolates and alcohol and things like that, and, you know, you're going to get the gout. So when you get the gout, basically you're forming little crystals in your joints, and crystals cause inflammation, but until you get rid of those crystals, you're not going to feel better. So it can help a little bit with the sequelae, but it can't stop the gout. Yep.
What's the situation with olive oil?
Olive oil is one of the good ones. So when you have your salad dressing, and that's a great thing, I'm glad you mentioned that. I should have mentioned that. You go ahead and put olive oil on there and you're eating fine. Good idea.
Yeah, but now they're saying that some olive oil is contaminated.
Yeah, well, don't eat that contaminated. Yeah, well, you're right. They get you one way or another. And, you know, when you're cooking, you know, I had mentioned before, you know, you saute, you fry something up in the pan, and you're saying to yourself, well, what oil should I use then? If I'm not using corn oil or using canola, which are all omega-6s, what should I use? Coconut oil. Coconut oil is great. And there are others, too. We talk about them in the book. But I use coconut oil. And believe me, first of all, I love coconuts. So to me, it wouldn't be bad if it did flavor. But I don't think I can really tell the difference that much. Go ahead.
Pina
Is
colada.
there a relationship between inflammation and cancer? And
There is
you know,
absolutely.
there is. I mean, is that
Oh,
what
yeah.
they're working on now?
The inflammatory basis of cancers, absolutely.
Okay.
Positively, yeah, and you can go to the last chapter, the bonus chapter in the book. It's how a healthy joint lifestyle reduces heart disease and reduces cancer risk. Because we know that inflammation is a big part of it. You know, the Blavatnik Foundation is a philanthropic foundation that just gave Yale $10 million to start investigating inflammation as the cause of everything.
Wow.
Inflammation is important stuff.
Yeah.
You know, what happens with inflammation is that, and the book goes into it a little bit more detail from a molecular basis, more than probably most of you want to hear, but there's this one particular molecule called NF-kappa beta. And NF-kappa beta, when it's activated, activates the DNA to produce all these inflammatory molecules. It also stops the production of the molecules that make cells die. Now you say, why would I want my cells to die? Well, cells have to die in order when they start to mutate. So when you get something that's turning cancerous, you want that cell to turn on the death mechanism so that it doesn't become cancerous. Well, NF-kappa beta plays a part in that, and that's part of the inflammatory cascade. It's probably the leading transcription factor in inflammation. And the book, you know, talks about that in detail. And in fact, I think it's the first book to link NF-kappa beta to joint disease. Yes, go ahead.
Are you going to comment on the vegetable-based proteins?
Vegetables are great. That's what you got to know. That's a generalization, and it's a great generalization. Vegetables are great. Most of us don't eat just vegetables. So if you're a vegetarian, joint health, no question. I love it. Now, you can't just eat anything, because you can not get enough proteins. You could eat vegetables that are less complex, that'll raise your insulin levels. But in general, if you're eating a vegetarian lifestyle, you're probably eating a joint healthy lifestyle. Yeah. Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about the supplements? At what point do we need supplements?
That's a great question. We're gonna do two more things. I guess I'm a little long-winded here. I've been going on, time seems to fly. I was gonna talk a little bit about exercise and then a little bit about supplements. I think probably about 5 minutes on each. Do you all have the time?
Sure.
Good,
Oh, we have
okay.
plenty of time.
All right, good. That's all we've got is time. All right, well, I'm going to get to your supplements, but I'm going to go to exercise just for a couple of minutes, and then we'll get to supplements, and then we'll kind of wrap things up, and you can ask, any questions. And, feel free to raise your hand at any time. I'm watching you all very closely, so I can tell if you're sleeping. If anybody's sleeping out there, I'll know it. So exercise is important, and we're at the YMCA, so why wouldn't we talk about exercise, right? I mean, exercise is really important stuff. Your joints hurt. So when your joints hurt, do you want to exercise? No, you don't want to exercise because you're saying that my joints hurt when I exercise. But what you need to know about exercise is that exercise lubricates your joints. So your joints are getting dried out, right? Your joints got that nice, soft, smooth cartilage, and that soft, smooth cartilage rubs beautifully. Well, it's got a thin, thin layer of fluid in it, and that thin fluid layer lubricates and makes it move even more smoothly, frictionless virtually. So that smooth layer starts to degenerate, and the lubrication starts to dry up, and what do you get? You get a stiff joint that doesn't want to move, and so it's a death spiral. You don't move it, it gets drier, and it hurts even more. Then the ligaments start to get stiff. The ligaments shorten. Those are the things that hold the bone together, right? They stiffen up and it puts more pressure. So you have less cushioning and more pressure. So the physiology of the process of osteoarthritis is making things worse and worse. And you're getting more and more contracted and bent over and stiff. And you don't want to move, and what you really have to do is move. Now I talk in Healthy Joints for Life about how many hours there are in a week, and I think there's 168. And you only have to exercise over that week, about an hour or so. You don't have to do very much. If you just move for an hour during the week, and you don't move for the other 167 hours, you're going to be noticeably better. It's hard to imagine that you could make that little bit of an effort, but that will help. Now, you've got to do it the right way. You can't say, oh, I'm hunched over and I'm hurting and I'm going to go run. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. You have to do things that are gentle. Now, there's three different forms, or three different aspects to exercise that we want to talk about. We want to talk about aerobic exercise, because aerobic means you're moving your joints, you're helping your heart as well. We want to talk about flexibility, because what I just mentioned to you about the ligaments, we don't want tight ligaments. Tight ligaments, you lose range of motion, and you increase force in the joint. We don't want to increase forces in joint. We want joints to be nice and loose so that there's less pressure on them. And then we got to think about strengthening, because if you don't have strong muscles, then you're going to fall. If you don't have strong muscles, your joints don't move correctly. So these are all bad things, and we need to think about aerobic exercise. And water is great. Water aerobics, beautiful. The buoyancy of the water keeps you, and you can start moving joints much more easily. You can't get into water. You have water. Excuse me. Maybe you want warm water even, because warm makes things more flexible. What happens to plastic when it's warmed up? It bends. What happens to plastic when you freeze it? It breaks. So you go in warm water, and that makes your joints feel so much better. You start moving them. Now, like I said, not all of us have water. Not all of us are graced with that wonderful YMCA pool that you see here. But maybe you go and you get on a bicycle, stationary probably, and you just pedal a little bit. You don't have to go. You go 30 seconds, that's great. You go 5 minutes, even better. Do what you can. Maybe you're, in our gym over here at the Y, and you get on one of those elliptical machines. Maybe you just want to go onto the treadmill. But aerobic activity is healthy for your joints because you move them, and as you move them, what does that do? It lubricates. It stimulates those little cells in the synovium around the joints, and the synovial cells will produce that wonderfully slippery fluid that makes your joints move so nicely. So we want to do the aerobic activity. We want to concentrate on flexibility too. So you see people saying, you got to stretch, you got to stretch. Oh, I hate to stretch. No, I don't want to stretch. You got to stretch. Stretching takes those ligaments and decreases the pressure on the joints. You got to strengthen. And you know, you can strengthen in different ways. We talk about 3 different ways. Isometrics, where you just go ahead, push on a stationary object, right? You go ahead and push here. Whoa, I'm gonna knock that off. Not as strong as I thought. Maybe I'm stronger than I thought. So, you know, you go ahead and you push on a station. That's isometrics. I'm training my bicep just by pushing up like that. If you got a really arthritic joint and you can't, and when you move it, it hurts, you can just strengthen the muscles by just holding it for a 10-second count and doing it a bunch of times. You know, maybe when you can't do weights, you know, lifting weights, it hurts. So you want to get resistance bands. If you've ever seen those stretchy elastics, you can use those stretchy elastics and push through range of motion, and that can help. So you can use isometrics, use resistance bands. Maybe you want to do weights. Maybe your arms are perfectly fine. Maybe your knees are the problem, your arms are fine. You do weights for your arms, and you do resistance bands or isometrics for your lower legs. So exercise is really important. It facilitates lubrication of your joints, and if you can't move, you can't really live well. So we want you to do that. Yes?
Salt water.
Salt water, very buoyant.
My grandmother, God bless her soul, she's heard the story so many times, but in the 20s and 30s, she used to take me down to the lighthouse. She loved the salt water for her arthritic pains. She even went to Florida when it was warm. But I just wanted to know how good the salt water is.
Yeah, salt
for your
water is
body.
great, and especially it's buoyant, but most of us don't have saltwater pools, but if you can get to the ocean, that's great. I agree. Someone else had a question. Here we go.
Do you, by exercising, are you able to increase that film that you were talking about? Or
Exactly.
once it's formed, it's gone?
Nope, that's exactly what you need to do. That's why when you stop exercising, you're not stimulating those cells in the synovium to produce the fluid, right? And then when you start exercising, you stimulate them. You tell them, hey, I need some, you know, it's like a call out. You're exercising, hey, send some fluid down, send some of that slippery fluid. And it does. So yes, absolutely. And that's why we're talking to you about doing aerobic exercise, because that's sending the message, produce that fluid. We're talking about flexibility to try and decrease the pressure on the joint. We're talking about strength to help guide you better. You know, if you're really weak, it's hard to exercise. But as you strengthen more, it makes it easier for you to exercise. So we've talked a little bit about nutrition. We talked a little bit about exercise as well.
How about
And
walking?
walking is wonderful too. You get on a treadmill and you walk, beautiful. That's great. That's absolutely great. So we're going to change subjects a little bit here and go to supplements now. So we talked a little bit earlier about those inflammatory pathways. So we know all these molecular pathways, right? We got these really smart people who have done research and they figured out which steps go on, and then they figured out also that some of those steps can be interrupted. And there's literature from scientists all over the world which tell us what natural supplements will stop which inflammatory pathways. So if we've got a list of a bunch of pathways, and they're actually in the book for you to look at, you can see a list of pathways, and then you find out which supplements, which natural things, whether it's green tea or silymarin or resveratrol or cumin, things that you probably haven't heard of that much, can actually stop those inflammatory pathways. So I looked through 600 scientific articles. Now, I'm sure a lot of you want to read 600 scientific articles. I mean, you talk about getting a headache. But there's a bibliography for Healthy Joints for Life. If you wanted to read them all, you could. But basically, what I do is I distill the process. I concentrate everything down and tell you. I think there's about 18 to 20 healthy supplements that you can take. Probably the one that most of you have heard about is glucosamine and chondroitin.
Yes.
And I would put that at number 20. So if you want to know about the 19 others that are ahead of glucosamine and chondroitin, you know, you take a look at the book. I'm not going to list them all here for you, but you know, there's a lot of neat things. You know, you want to know that your bone, for instance, needs calcium and vitamin D. Those are joint healthy. Your cartilage needs green tea. Green tea is great for your cartilage cells. Your ligaments and your tendons need vitamin C. because vitamin C helps to meld those collagen fibers together to give them strength. So you learn all these things. You want to know NF-kappa beta fighters. You want to know things that fight NF-kappa beta, whether it's vitamin B6, for instance. Vitamin E's. Does anybody take vitamin E here? All right. How many of you know? How many of you know that vitamin E isn't the greatest unless you're taking gamma tocotrienols? Now, none of you are taking gamma tocotrienols. Well, probably. Vitamin E is divided into tocopherols and tocotrienols. Okay, you got two. Then the tocotrienols, it's a subgroup there. And gamma of the tocotrienols are the one that you want. And so, you know, it's hard to, how do you know that? Vitamin E is good for you, right? Well, true, vitamin E, but it's a subgroup that you want, and it's not just the whole vitamin E. So when you're looking to be healthy, it's not always easy because it's the details that count. You know, cumin is great for you. You know, curry, many people have had curry. Cumin is in curry.
Q10.
No, that's not it. Cumin. So cumin, unfortunately, when you ingest it, it's inactivated by your liver very, very quickly. So 20 minutes later, cumin's gone. And cumin is so good for your joints. So some smart people figured out and made biocurcumax. Biocurcumax goes into your blood, it's not inactivated, and it's good for 8 hours. So you take biocurcumax twice a day, you've got it in your system for 16 hours. So here's just two indications. You take the right cumin, and it's helping you. You take the right vitamin E, and it's helping you. You take the wrong cumin and the wrong vitamin E, and you're spending the money, and you're not getting what you need. So you got to know the details. And that's what Healthy Joints for Life is about. It's about telling you the details so that you can be successful in what you do. You can't just do what you think. A lot of these supplements, and I'm going to get to all your questions in just one, I'm going to finish this one thing. Fight NF-kappa beta. Nobody's heard of NF-kappa beta, never mind think that you could fight it. But that's what all the scientific literature is about. That's what you have someone like me, you know, scouring through the scientific literature to find out what fights NF-kappa beta. So you're going to take supplements that fight NF-kappa beta. You're going to take supplements that support your joints, and you're going to have a joint healthy lifestyle with your exercise and with your nutrition. And that's going to get you where you need to be. And you know, this works so much of the time, but it takes a bit of an effort. You got to get that pantry where you're supposed to. You got to make the right choices when you see the watermelon and you see the strawberries. You got to have the right steak. You can't just have any steak. Maybe you better start thinking about eating more chicken and pork chops. You want to have lean cuts. Maybe you need to stay away from that darn salad dressing that you've been having before. You got to think, geez, I'm going to have to start taking supplements? Are you crazy? Pills? I hate taking pills. You want to get enough of the stuff. You want green tea? You want to have 16 cups of green tea a day? I don't think so. You take green tea extract. And green tea extract loves to help cartilage cells. So the bottom line is that Healthy Joints for Life is there for everyone. It's my toil. It's my passion in life. You know, I do it for all of you, and I hope that you can all benefit from it. So thank you very much for allowing me to talk to you today.